All right guys, we're here on the second portion. We're now looking at the VRF fan coil units. I'm going to explain one of the Daikin fan coil units is going to be typical throughout. So as we can see here, this is one of our Daikin fan coil units. This is a direct drive fan coil. There's no belts. They're small internal motors that are ECM. So as far as maintenance, there's not much when it comes to the fan. These fan coils do have internal condensate pumps. So when it comes to maintenance, at some point, potentially, you know, as we all know, that might be a part that fails. But there is access. Here, I'm gonna point out to the condensate pump. So they do have access to be replaced. The motors are around this big. They are serviceable. Also, as we take a look up here, this is your filter bank, and this is your filter access. So in here, this is where you obviously will have your filter access to remove filters when the time comes. As you can see, there is a secondary pan. Inside the secondary pan, we have wet switches installed, or hockey pucks, as some guys might know them. If there is a leak or if that pump does fail, that secondary pan will get filled with water, and the wet switch will get wet and open up its normally closed contact, alarming the unit. So that alarm would also go to the corresponding thermostat, and it will go to the BMS. Fan coils are individually wired to the heat recovery box. So when we go to the next portion, I'll show you guys the heat recovery box. So part of this VRF system, you have 2 condensers on the roof, you have 9 fan coil units, and 2 heat recovery boxes. So the heat recovery box, when we get there, I'll break it down on how it works and how the communications and the low voltage wires get connected to it. But just to follow back up with the fan coil, here each fan coil has a smoke detector, as you can see on the supply ductwork here that I'm pointing out. When there is a fire or it detects any kind of smoke, this smoke detector will go off and shut. It will trigger the alarm, and it will shut down all the units. It's a global shutdown. So every unit out here will shut down. The ones that won't shut down are the mini splits in the electrical room and the IT room. Just to make that clear, because anything over 2,000 CFM requires us to shut down the HVAC mechanical equipment, just so everyone's aware. So at that point, when it comes to resetting, now depending if there is a fire, fire department might come out. They might contact the fire alarm company to come out, and you know they'll be able to reset the fire alarm panel if all is good and there's no fire and everything's taken care of. So there's a relay in the panel that pretty much just opens, stating that hey, we're in alarm, and it kills the units.
So as soon as we reset the panel, the whole system will reset on its own?
The system will reset and it should come back on. So aside from that, this is pretty much going to be your standard Daikin fan coil unit with your filter access, your condensate, and that's pretty much it. Well, one thing to mention, each fan coil is labeled, and the thermostats are also labeled. So you can correspond the thermostat and the fan coil from the tag number on top. There's a black and white tag that you know gives a description of the fan coil. So this fan coil here, each one has its own individual wet switch in the secondary pan. If that fan coil's condensate pump were to fail, if there's a leak and the secondary pan were to fill up with water, that wet switch would trigger just for that fan coil and shut that unit down, and alarm will be present at its dedicated thermostat and the BMS. It will not trigger the rest of the fan coil units. It's not something that's ran in series, so it's just individually for that fan coil. This will conclude this section of the training with our Daikin fan coil units.